Okay, you saw that graph in the thumbnail. You want to know what it's about, and I'm going to explain it in just 1 second. But to provide you a little bit of context for this video, I'm going to be going through the results of a study called The Height of Choosiness, Mutual Mate Choice for Stature Results in Suboptimal Pair Formation for Both Sexes. This study is a massive collection of data, and I really mean massive. They surveyed participants from 174 different speed dating events, something like 5,782 individual speed daters, which resulted in about 128,000 different choices, all being analyzed. In this study, we're going to find out the real, factual, raw, scientific truth about how women feel about short men. I really trust this data because height is something that is objectively measurable. It's black and white. It's not as subjective as, oh, well, do you think his face is attractive, where people might differ one way or the other. No. If somebody is 6 foot, then they are 6 foot. And it is a fact that they are that tall. And it is also a fact that women really do not like short guys. When you ask women, what kind of a man do you want to date? They will give you a minimum height that he needs to be. And if he falls beneath that height, then they will not consider dating him. Women like tall men, at the very least taller than them. But what this means for shorter guys is that there is a very small pool of women who would consider dating them. And because there's quite a few short guys, 49% I suppose are below average in terms of height, then because there's so many guys and such a small pool of women that are willing to date, shorter or below average height guys, it means that competition for those few women is extremely fierce, which brings us to our graph. So let's look at the graph that you saw in the thumbnail. You can see here that the black line is the number of competitors that a man of various heights is going to have for a single woman. Now, the average height of men in the United States is 175 centimeters. So if you can see here at 170 centimeters, because you are below average in height, fewer women are willing to date you. So on average, there's going to be 2 men competing for every woman in that height range. As you get shorter, it gets way, way harder, like exponentially more difficult. If you drop just 10 centimeters down from 170 to 160 centimeters, suddenly you're competing with 11 guys for every woman. And it gets worse because the problem is not just that there's a very small pool of women who are willing to date short men, it's that even those women who are willing, like they're open to dating, men who are a bit shorter or below average, that doesn't mean they have a preference for dating short men. No, it just means they're open to it. They still have a preference for dating taller men. That's exactly what the research demonstrates. Reading directly from the study, women's preferences were more strongly related to subsequent choice than those of men. Women reported a narrower preferred height range than men, and they were also less likely to choose men that fell outside this range. How did researchers find this out? It was actually quite simple. All they did is they tested and measured the likelihood of 2 individuals, a man and a woman, matching up and going on a date if the other person fell outside of their stated preference for height range. When they did that, they found that women were approximately twice as likely, 2 times as likely as men are to stick within their stated preference. In layman's terms, a man might say, yeah, I'm interested in dating women in this height, but actually he doesn't really care. He's flexible, he's willing to change once he meets the individual. Women, not so much. When they say they want a man of this height within this range, they mean it. They stick to their preference. Men are just not that fussy. And what the data shows is that their preferred range of, women's height is actually quite broad. They don't mind tall women, average women, short women. Men just like women. They found that in a speed dating event, if a woman was presented to them and she fell 1 inch outside of his stated preference for height, there was still a 40% chance that he would say yes to her. What about for women though? Were they as forgiving? Absolutely not. Keeping in mind, of course, that they already began with a much smaller acceptable range of height than men did. For women, we found that the likelihood of saying yes to an individual who fell 1 inch outside the preferred height range was predicted to be 24.8%. which is far lower than male 40%. Like I said, not only are women more narrow in the height that they're looking for, but they are much more likely to stick to their preference. Let's look at some more data. I found that a third party had taken some of the research results from this study and created this graph. And what you're looking at right now, this shows the percentage of women that will consider dating a man at each height. So as a reference point, I'm about here. I'm 174 centimeters, which is 68.5 inches, or you might know it as 5'9". Now look there, you see 55% of women would consider dating me, but 45% would say no based just on my height, wouldn't even consider it. That's crazy. I'm just below average in height. 175 centimeters is average. I'm 174, so I'm not even that short, but as short as I am, 45% of women say that my height is unacceptable. How did women's expectations get so out of touch with reality? Honestly, I'm not sure that the species can survive if women's desires, if their expectations are so far removed from the actual physicality of men. I mean, 45% is pretty high, but let's be honest, it's fine. Half the women out there are still open to it. Guys my height are okay. Where it gets really brutal are for men who are significantly shorter than me. It just gets exponentially so much tougher. This whole thing, it reminds me of the conversation that I had with that black pill guy, Wheat Waffles. If you haven't seen the interview I did with him, I'm going to put a link down below. I really recommend you watch it. It's a fascinating interview. At one point, he said that he believed that women care more about appearances than men do. And I disagreed with him. I'm thinking, no, that can't possibly be true. Like, we're men, like we're pretty shallow. We really like a good looking girl. Like, surely we're the more superficial of it. But when you look at that graph and you consider height as part of the overall package of appearance, and I don't see why you wouldn't, what he says begins to make sense. Is there anything about a woman's appearance that automatically, just being like slightly below average, would knock out 45% of the population for men? Would men ever be that discriminating and that shallow against a woman's appearance? I'm not sure that they would. I mean, we've sort of become desensitized to it. Like, yeah, women like tall men, we just sort of accept it. But when you stop and think about it, for basically half of all women to say that average height or just below average height is unacceptable, could not date a man, like, that's nuts. I guess that it sort of fits with data that I've shown in previous videos that demonstrate that, women were twice as likely to reproduce. You have twice as many female ancestors as you do male ones, because so many men didn't pass on their offspring. It's really a winner takes all kind of brutal dating market out there. And maybe this is just, that's just what we're seeing, is that women, they're not interested in those lower height men. We're practicing collective eugenics. We're trying to get taller as a species. You ever heard that data? I heard that years ago, that we're taller now than we used to be. I can't verify if that's true or not, but maybe that's not natural selection. We're not adapting to be taller to meet natural, predators or anything like that in our physical environment. Maybe it's just the result of sexual selection. If women keep only wanting to sleep and have children with tall guys, it would make sense that our species would gradually be getting taller, right? Women's mating preferences might actually breed short men out of the collective gene pool of humanity. All right, all my below average brothers out there, we're a dying breed. Anyway, moving on, because there's some more interesting stuff in this study that I want to go through. Like, I want to ask you this question. What would you think that women would say is the ideal difference in terms of height? Like, if they could pick how much taller they want their man to be than them, what height would you guess on average women would say? Now, for context, they asked the same question for men, and just as a point of comparison, I'll tell you, men on average wanted women to be 7 centimeters shorter than them. And so what do you think women said? Do you think that they said that they want men to be 7 centimeters taller than them? No chance. Let's see what the study said. Women, in contrast, were most likely to give a yes response when the man was 25 centimeters taller. Most likely to give a yes response, which means to match up with them to go on a date, when the man is 25 centimeters taller. That was the best predictor of going on a date. We then calculated the height difference with the highest likelihood of a match. we found a maximum likelihood of a match at 19.2 centimeters, which falls in between the most chosen value for men, 7.1 centimeters, and women, 25.1 centimeters. Yes, it does fall between, but it's not really much of a compromise. Women only went down 6 centimeters, whereas men compromised twice that number. The fact that the maximum likelihood of a match is much closer to a woman's stated preference for height differential is another important reminder that women absolutely dictate the dating market. You know, they say what goes and what doesn't. If they say they want this height, then they're the ones that are going to get what they want, and men just have to adapt to that. We don't have that kind of power in the dating market. Women are the sexual selectors. Also interesting is this graph, which was created using data from the study. What you're looking at here, this shows how many more women would accept you if you gained 2 inches of height, which is approximately 5 centimeters. So just for reference, I'm about here, and that correlates to about 1.5, or about a 50% increase. Now, I can't make myself grow 50 centimeters, but still, this data is truly remarkable because it shows just how important height is for women. Like, I'm scratching my head here. I cannot think of a single other factor that could ever give me a 50% increase in the number of women that I could attract. More confidence, more game, more status, more wealth, you know, self-esteem, a better looking face even. No, I'm sure it couldn't make that much of a difference. The biggest thing is I've just got to be 2 inches taller. Here's another interesting one. Have a look at this graph. What you're seeing here is the likelihood of receiving a yes based on where you are in height. And for some reason, this one's in centimeters. I don't know why. What I find particularly interesting is look at this massive drop off from here to here, which is around about my height. That 5 centimeters is massive. I think what you're seeing there is basically the minimum threshold that women have for height. Like, it's around about there that you find women go, oh yes, now he's acceptably tall. But below that, you know, God help you. This graph, it really makes me think that short guys, they just can't really afford to be picky, you know. It's so difficult for them, and they face so much competition, and women's preferences are so biased towards taller men, 25 centimeters taller. So that if there is a woman, you know, who's high quality, who's into you, who shows some interest, you kind of have to take that option, you know. Short guys, they've it's brutal. Now, you might be curious to know, is this like preference, what we're seeing from women, is this typical of average or, you know, taller women? What about really short women? Are they going to have, you know, less of a preference in terms of height? Are they going to be more open to dating short guys? You know, after all, they're short themselves. I understand why you might think that, and I'm sorry to do this to you. But listen to this line from the study. There was no influence of a woman's height on her responsiveness. You understand what that means? Even if the woman is short, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. She's still going to be as picky and choosy about height as any of them. The other demographic that are really choosy are tall men. You know, they've basically got the interest of every woman, so they can afford to be a lot more picky. This is what the study says. Specifically, taller men were less responsive than shorter men. The lower responsiveness displayed by taller men can be partly explained by their increased desirability. In layman's terms, the reason that they're less likely to compromise on their preferences is because they don't need to. You know, they've got so many options, they can basically hold out for exactly what it is that they want. If you're a woman or if you're a tall guy, you can be picky in the dating market. But if you're an average or below average height guy, not so much. But don't start thinking that because tall men are picky and choosy that they go home empty-handed, you know, that pickiness is somehow going to impact on their ability to actually find a match. Not at all. Despite being less responsive, taller men were most likely to end up with a match. And so we come up towards the end of the video, and I hope that I have eased you into this one. And I'm saving some of the most brutal lines from the study for last, because you won't believe what they say the silver lining is for short guys. Let me read you what they think the solution is for short men. Although shorter men were much less likely to find a match during speed dating events, they may nevertheless succeed in finding a partner outside of this more restricted context because the availability of average height and taller men in the population is obviously finite. Once more preferred men are removed from the mating pool, some women might be forced to compromise with respect to partner height and pair up with shorter men. So in case you're a short guy and you found the results of this study depressing, don't worry. You see, even though all the women want, taller guys, they all want to date tall guys, there's a limited number of tall guys out there. And so once all the tall guys are taken and removed from the dating market, women are going to be forced to be with you. They're going to be forced to lower their standards and compromise and settle for you. Yay! Lucky you. Sure, she would rather you be 25 centimeters taller than her, but all those men are taken. So she'll settle for you, so don't be depressed. I mean... Oh. So what are you meant to do? Right? Like, if you're a short guy, what actually is the solution? I have a video on my Patreon. It's quite a long video, and it's advice for short guys, and I do recommend it. But there is no silver bullet. There's no magic pill as far as I can tell. There's nothing you can do that's automatically going to fix this height issue, Short of women just kind of coming to their senses and realizing that these expectations of height are unrealistic and it just doesn't match up with nature, I'm not sure things are actually going to improve for you. I'm sorry to laugh through this. I so badly want to help out men, and then sometimes the data is just so brutal, and if you don't laugh, you cry. Look, if you're really struggling with height, that you're actually finding this is really a big issue and you need to talk it through, you can send me a video, send me a request on Hey Hero. I'll send you a personalized video in response and we'll work it out together. We'll see what your options are. But right now, I want to talk about something that I never really would have considered before. And credit goes to Wheat Waffles. He's that black pill guy that I mentioned earlier. I really do recommend, if you haven't seen that interview, go and watch the entire thing. And on my Patreon, I give my thoughts about the interview afterwards if you want a little bit more context. But credit to him, he came up with this idea. I don't know if he came up with it, but he explained to me the idea of geomaxing. And what is geomaxing? Geomaxing is the idea of moving to a place on the globe where people are shorter. So if you as an individual are below average in height, it may be because you're existing in a particular country, but not all people are the same heights. Everywhere that you go, there are countries where men and women are shorter, and so you will appear taller by contrast. It's not something I ever would have considered before, and when I first heard it, I admit I thought that it was ridiculous. Do what you can inside your own country, I probably thought. But it's really not for me to say. If you're really like a really short guy and you're really struggling with this, maybe, it's time to be a little bit creative. So I thought at the end of this video, to try and, offer some hope, I would show you this list. What you're seeing here is a list of the 5 countries where people are shortest. And so, I don't know, maybe you want to move to one of these places. Obviously, if you do that, you're making it even harder for the short men in those countries, and I don't really have a solution for that. But, dating is a selfish game. You've got to look out for your own interests here. So what have we got here? We've got Peru. The average height is 5 feet 2 inches. Sri Lanka, 5 feet 1.5 inches. Philippines, the same height. Indonesia, even shorter, 4 feet 11.75 inches. And it seems like Bolivia is where people are the shortest. That's 4 feet 11.5 inches. Again, all of this would be a lot easier if women could just relax their standards, relax their expectations for how tall men should be, so that it can be within an acceptable or realistic, height range. But I don't see that happening soon. Women compromise. That's not a message that's easy to sell. If you're dating a woman and she has a platonic male friend, a man who's just her friend, her buddy, maybe he was even an ex-boyfriend, but they're just friends now, how are you meant to deal with that situation? Specifically, if she wants to go and spend time with him alone, what are you meant to do? Do you speak up and risk being accused of being paranoid or jealous? Or do you just let her go and potentially let some other guy, hit on her, some orbiter friend zone guy who's always trying to get in her pants? Is that comfortable? There is actually a very specific course of action that you should take in this situation that should remove all of your problems. And I go through it in my latest Patreon video. If you want to see that, just go and sign up on my Patreon. It's just a $5 a month subscription. You get instant access to a whole bunch of exclusive content. It's a great way to support the channel. We have an awesome community over there. What else can I say to sell you on it? You won't regret it. People who sign up, they love it. They think it's tremendous value. I'd love to see you over there.